Hello, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, and welcome to the newest episode of the Noobs and Knockouts podcast. I'm Austin. Hello, I'm a knockout. I've watched a lot of wrestling.
Hi, I'm David. I've watched a little bit. Some would say a fair amount now. But also as I learned, something approaching probably 10 hours at this point. Yeah, it actually turns out to be not that much wrestling. Who'd have thunk?
10 hours. Like there's like 10 hours of new wrestling a week. Dude, that's nothing.
I've watched a week's worth of wrestling. There we go. Officially.
Cool. Awesome.
Austin has declared it. He's the expert. We got to listen to him.
I mean, look, let's put the math. Is that, it's Monday Night Raw for WWE is 3 hours. SmackDown is 2 hours. NXT is 2 hours. And AEW Dynamite is 2 hours. So that's 9 hours a week of the airs on primetime cable. Let alone, Impact has a weekly 2-hour show. If you watch that, New Japan has hours of shows a week when they air. We will never run out of content. We're
just all over the goddamn place. Never. Not once. Never.
Okay, which gets us to tonight's episode, which is going back to the far-flung past of 2011. It actually does. We've never watched anything more recent in WWE than 2013, but if we did, it would actually be kind of a significant difference from even 2011. But the reason I chose 2011 is because I feel like we're going on a bit of a rotation here, and I kind of am treating modern contemporary WWE as what would be known in the wrestling kind of discourse as the PG era, when WWE went back to being TV PG in 2008. And I'm not really going to go into the history of that tonight. It's not super relevant. Just to know is that the reason I picked this episode is that it is the start of arguably kind of like one of the biggest storylines of this entire era of time, which is known as the Summer of Punk, or in reference to CM Punk, the wrestler at the center of it all. And it covers the summer of 2011, and I feel like for the next few episodes that we cover in this era of time, this is what I want to focus on, because it's kind of a super interesting storyline for a few reasons. But I'll go more into that when we actually watch the episode. So, where is WWE in 2011? I mean, I guess they're still kind of in a very similar place as 2013, honestly, and where they are. It's the only major differences, I think, is that NXT doesn't exist yet. Well, it does, but not as a. I think I mentioned NXT briefly in our first episode as kind of like WWE's farm league, if you want to use another sports analogy, its own minor league system that it uses to train guys and get them ready for main WWE TV. But they didn't start using NXT like that until 2012. NXT in 2011 is this weird third show that they would do that was kind of like a game show. It's like taking it's supposed to be this like take these rookies and the winner gets a WWE contract and all that stuff. It's kind of like some weird reality show concept, and it also wasn't very good because it was weird. There are highlights to it, especially if you're into so bad it's good kind of television. But it wasn't very good, and by now it still exists, but like nobody cares. Nobody really cares. And then the other thing that I guess is important right now is that the brand split is a little more defined than it was before. in 2013. I did mention that like WWE used to try to like combine their rosters into break the rosters up into two groups, Raw and SmackDown, and keep them separate.
Mm-hmm.
But 2013, that concept was basically dead, and it would be officially dead in 2013. Later in 2013, in 2011 is kind of like the beginning of the end, where they started flirting a lot more with this idea of the Raw Super Show, where SmackDown wrestlers could show up on Raw, thus defeating the point.
Okay. Yeah.
But it still exists in that, like, there are certain wrestlers and championships that haven't really appeared on Raw. For context, I watched the most recent pay-per-view, which was called Capital Punishment. I'll talk about that in a second. And the Raw and SmackDown before this episode. And there are wrestlers and storylines that really only exist on SmackDown. So it still kind of exists, but if it's important enough, it'll show up on Raw too, is what I'm kind of getting at.
Okay.
And so... the build up,
but this was an era where it feels a little more like a crossover episode then.
Yeah, they'll do crossover bits, especially this week and last week's episodes in 2011 were very much kind of big, kind of like gimmicky crossovers to try to get ratings. But to that point. Yeah. So the most recent pay-per-view was Capital Punishment. It was a one-time event that happened in 2011 that it took place in Washington, D.C. There are two things that are super notable about that show, one of which is good, one of which isn't. One of which is the fact that they actually built the set to look like the White House. So it has a very cool, unique aesthetic to it. The other thing that happened is they hired, I forget the guy's name, they hired an actor who was a Barack Obama impersonator to show up and do comedy skits. And,
Yep, you mentioned that before.
And it's the kind of dumb skits that you'd kind of expect. Like they make Obamacare jokes about keeping you can keep your health care coverage. And they have Vicky Guerrero, who you might remember her as beleaguered middle management from 2013. And at this point in time,
I remember Vicky.
Yeah, at this point in time, she's not middle management, and instead is just a manager for a wrestler. And her character she's like a cougar, or she's supposed to be. And so she parodies the Marilyn Monroe "Happy Birthday" song at the Barack Obama impersonator until she gets pulled away by the Secret Service.
Why?
And they have the Obama impersonator.
Poor Vicky just cannot catch a break, dude. Jesus.
No, not really. But they have the Obama impersonator do a speech in front of the crowd and do the Obama thing. And he talks about he's cheering for John Cena. I don't know. Basically, I just feel like I recently watched a compilation of Michael Brooks' best impersonations, including his Nation of Islam Obama. This dude just doing this boilerplate Obama impersonation just isn't very funny.
Oh.
But
that's lame.
The only skit that was only remotely kind of funny is that there's a comedy wrestler in WWE at this time called named Santino Marella, and his finishing move is the Cobra, where he twists his arm into a Cobra-like move and just hits people with it, and it's supposed to be a kill shot, even though it's not.
It's
just his hand, but he tries to keep.
It's these Rahman levels of attack.
Yeah, but he teaches the Obama impersonator how to do the Cobra. But then by the end of the move, he has the Cobra pointed at Obama, and it causes the Secret Service to tackle him to the ground.
Okay, I will admit that's pretty funny.
No, that was a funny bit. I wish that was the only bit.
That's actually humorous.
Yeah, so that was the most recent pay-per-view. So that the new stories Actually, not a whole lot of new stories right now, especially because the week before on Raw was the People's Choice episode of Raw. Excuse me, Power to the People, where basically most of the matches and stipulations were voted on by fans. You could text a number and you could text your vote, and then that'll be so like. There is kind of plot advancement, but not as much as you'd think because it's not, a regularly written episode of television.
Mm-hmm.
But there are storylines going on right now, and we're all building to the next.
WWE does Whose Line?
Yeah. Probably the most interesting thing that happened is that there was an accidental glitch in the system during one of the votes. So a guy who shouldn't have won, and they had to work around it. But anyway, the storylines going in is really there's only one big storyline that we have to cover. I'm going to cover all of them, but the important one is this the WWE title scene. Right now, the champion is John Cena. Not surprising. Right now, he's kind of in his peak,
as you do,
his peak child-friendly babyface good guy character that the internet hates.
Yeah.
And
the internet can get over itself.
I mean, some of it's objectively pretty terrible. I had to listen to him do a promo in 2012 where he just made hokey Star Wars references the entire time. It was the worst thing I've ever heard on television. Actually, that's not true. I've heard a lot worse. It is bad. It was bad. But right now, he's okay, I guess.
The word is bad.
And he's champion, and he's kind of just getting out of a feud with a wrestler named R-Truth, who he is a rapper. Normally he has a comedy rapper gimmick, but he is in this special 1 year period of time when they actually wrote him to be a legitimate threat. And he is like this heel who believes that who's this paranoid crazy guy who thinks that there's a conspiracy against him who's holding him down, and the propaganda machine of John Cena needs to be destroyed. And it's like, okay, actually I'm kind of into this. I don't know why they just kind of decided not to ever come back to it for him and then just kind of make him go back to being this comedy jobber. But, he's doing okay work right now. But he's he's on his way out of the feud with Cena because he main evented the last show against Cena, but he lost. So he's kind of out of the title hunt. And incoming is CM Punk. And so CM Punk is kind of part of why this storyline with him is so important is because he's kind of like the first modern indie guy to make it big in WWE. After 2001, after WWE had kind of absorbed all of their biggest competitors and they were essentially a monopoly, they started to take a more hostile attitude towards wrestlers who worked on the modern indie scene. They kind of saw them as they weren't they kind of saw it as well, how much real wrestling experience do you have? Because you haven't worked in WWE. Where you haven't worked in the big league. Yeah. It was all very condescending and kind of obnoxious. And they preferred to build their guys up relatively from the ground up than kind of take on these guys who've been on the indie scene for a decade or whatever. And CM Punk was kind of the first big indie wrestler of his era to break through that kind of those kind of preconceptions and biases. And part of why that is obviously he's a phenomenal wrestler, but also he's an incredibly enthralling as a promo guy. As character work. He's always done incredible with what they've given him. In fact, his biggest storyline before this one was this really cool bit where he's the leader of a quasi cult called the Straight Edge Society, because he's legitimately straight edge. And it was kind of another take on this gimmick of my personal traits, in this case being straight edge, make me superior to you people. But he's trying to get people to follow in his beliefs, and he's got followers, and he gets this Jesus haircut beard combo. and he's just going all out with it, and it's kind of awesome. But they eventually, they end up kind of, it ends up kind of like going away, and he's found new, and he's now also the current leader of another group called the New Nexus. And I'm not going to explain the New Nexus because that's an offshoot of the Nexus, which is a whole other storyline that I would like to talk about and would like to save conversation about that for then. But just know that he has a group of flunkies who do his bidding. So
naturally.
Yeah. So CM Punk is now the number one contender for John Cena's WWE Championship. And he's laid out the challenge, and he's kind of he's given a lot of the normal spiel of he is the best wrestler in the world, and he's going to prove it at Money in the Bank. But another interesting wrinkle is that he brings up that not only is Money in the Bank when his championship match with John Cena is, it's also the last day of his WWE contract, which is actual kind of legit. That was legitimately, his contract was legitimately running out, and he hadn't re-signed yet. So he's making the threat that he's not just he's gonna beat John Cena and take that title hostage, because he's going to be a champion who doesn't have a WWE contract, and he can just leave. So that's kind of
you've mentioned that plot line before. Yep.
Yeah, no, that's where he's going with this right now, and it's kind of and this episode is where it really kicks off his feud with Cena. Last week was all about him kind of earning the right to be the number one contender, and now it's all about like the build up to him versus John Cena, the quintessential WWE guy versus the quintessential indie guy.
So CM Punk is healing right now then.
Yes, he is technically speaking the heel.
because he was I remember straight up face in the 2013 episode we watched.
Yeah. 2 years is a long time. But yeah, at this point in time he is a heel.
Oh, dang. All right.
And so that's that big storyline. The other major storyline we could look at right now is like the build up to Money in the Bank. I've explained it. I've definitely explained it on the 2013 episode because it was also the build up. They were also building to Money in the Bank. Didn't plan for that, but basically the Money in the Bank, the Money in the Bank pay-per-view is where you get a bunch of guys to compete in a ladder match, and the winner it collects a briefcase, the Money in the Bank briefcase, and it allows them to cash in and have a match for a world championship match at any time of their choosing. And that's kind of important wording because in the long history of Money in the Bank, what usually happens is instead of giving the champion notice and being like, next week, I'm going to challenge you for the world title. What instead they'll do is they'll wait until the champion is injured or down or tired or whatever, and just be like, hey, yeah, I want my world title match right now. And so they win with relative ease. And so also being Money in the Bank, winning the Money in the Bank briefcase is a near guarantee that you're going to win the world title in the future. And in fact, at this point in time, no one had ever failed to cash in. In the last 9 years, they've obviously changed that because it makes it a little more narratively interesting, I think, to throw in that kind of twist sometimes that, they fail. But at this point in time, no one had ever failed to cash in the Money in the Bank. So at this point, it's kind of treated as like you win this, you're going to be world champion. So for 2011, they had 2 Money in the Bank ladder matches, one for Raw and one for SmackDown. Because we're watching Raw, I'll focus on the guys who are going to be in the Raw match. And what they're doing, and it's kind of like the who's who of the mid card of Raw at this point in time. So right now we have Evan Bourne, who his gimmick is that he's a high flyer, and as much as that feels like that's not a real character, I also get that, like, at this point in time, somebody who's like who has the kind of hyper athletic style that we've seen in like Lucha Underground and AEW, like that wasn't really super common in WWE. So it actually
Yeah.
kind of can be a character that you can do these crazy athletic feats that no other person on this roster can do. But otherwise,
It's the WWE version of doing CrossFit or being parkour.
Yeah. I mean, they did have the parkour guy, but he's not in the company at this point.
Woof.
Oof. And so Evan Bourne, that's kind of, he's the squeaky clean good guy. You also have Rey Mysterio, who also does that, but has that air of like the longtime veteran of the game, as opposed to Evan Bourne, who's a lot younger. But I mean, it's Rey Mysterio. You know what he's about.
Yeah.
R-Truth is also in the Money in the Bank ladder match on Raw. We have Jack Swagger, who we've mentioned. You've had him before, where he was our good old fashioned hates Mexicans, we real American guy from 2013. Now,
oh shit, this guy.
Yeah, this is our third time with him actually in 6 episodes. Did not.
God damn.
I mean,
I forgot he was in the 90s too, wasn't he?
He wasn't in the 90s. He was in AEW.
Oh, wait. Oh, he was?
Yeah. He was one of Jericho's henchmen in AEW.
Oh, nice.
And right now he's but right now that's well before he starts doing that character. Right now he's just a bad guy ? Like he's just kind of this generic, arrogant dick. He's very generic bad guy kind of a character. He has kind of a patriotic aesthetic sort of sometimes, but it's not really an important part of his character in any way. He's just kind of there. The Miz and Alex Riley. I mentioned them both at the same time because they're in a feud with each other. The Miz is The Miz has an interesting story where like he was a lifelong wrestling fan and he ended up kind of getting into the WWE because he was on MTV's The Real World, and his shtick there was being an obnoxious wrestling nerd. And they're like, and WWE always won for some mainstream cred. Was like, let's sign this guy and train him to be a wrestler. And so now he plays kind of like the smarmy Weasley cheating heel, and he's excellent at it. And he's in a feud with Alex Riley because earlier in 2010. Yeah, okay, I got my timeline right. Late in 2010, Miz won the WWE Championship using the Money in the Bank. And he had Alex Riley there as like a rookie to like do all his dirty work, so he didn't have to try. And so, but at WrestleMania 27 in 2011, he lost the title to Cena. That's why Cena's champion now. And so eventually he would have a few rematches and he would also lose. And Alex Riley kind of accidentally cost Miz a lot of those matches. And so Miz is like, you're worthless, you're nothing, you're fired. And so that's why him and Alex Riley are having a feud, because now Alex Riley's kind of standing out on his own as a, I guess, generic good guy. And he's fighting his evil boss who kind of treated him badly and fired him. You know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's a nice little feud. And then the last member of the Money in the Bank ladder match right now is Alberto Del Rio. I guess let's talk about him. This is one of those feuds that his storyline is kind of crossing over with the stuff on SmackDown. Yeah, our rich Mexican aristocrat, Alberto Del Rio.
Yeah, didn't you say in this era he was actually kind of face, and like it was only 2013 he did a heel turn?
No, that was late 2012. Very small period of time where he's a face. Right now he's in his original run as a heel.
Oh, okay.
And basically, his character is basically the same as what you saw in 2013, so I'm not going to really talk about that. But right now, he's kind of in this interwoven feud with SmackDown wrestlers, in that he has been having fights with The Big Show, who is on SmackDown. And The Big Show is I get his name is kind of on the tin here because basically his character is that he is 7 foot tall and 400 pounds. He is a giant. He is very large, and he has the same. He has the same. He has the same disease that Andre the Giant had. If you need some, if you want some kind of visual reference, but
Okay.
but modern medical technology means that he won't die in the same tragically painful way that Andre did.
Well, that's good.
I guess, but yeah. So he's big. He's a big guy, and he's a baby face right now, and he's in a feud on SmackDown with Mark Henry, who you remember him from his fake retirement in 2013.
Yup.
So right now we're in peak Mark Henry, where he is doing his Hall of Pain character, where basically he's just like, I'm the world's strongest man, I can kick anybody's ass, and then he does it. It's pretty great, and he's right now setting his sights on the Big Show in a very much like, you're the biggest guy on this roster, huh? Well, I can kick your ass too.
Yeah, I mean, this is a clash of giants right here. So
It is.
This is big.
This is big. Two big boys going at it. And where Del Rio fits in is he's kind of looking to insert himself into the world title picture. And he's doing it by getting the better of the Big Show, because most of the time when him and Big Show fight, Mark Henry shows up to interfere and cost Big Show the match. And then yeah, and so Del Rio is keeps opportunistically beating the Big Show to further his own goals, while Big Show and Mark Henry are at each other's throats. So that's kind of the major SmackDown storyline that crosses over on this particular episode. And then let's see.
All right,
what else do I need to talk about? Oh, right, the U.S. title, the United States title, is probably the only major mid-card title that we have on this episode. The Intercontinental title has pretty been exclusive to SmackDown, and the tag team titles, I don't know where they are, to be honest. I have watched a pay-per-view, a Raw, and a SmackDown, and I haven't seen them. I had to Wikipedia who the champions are. They're two members of CM Punk. They're two members of CM Punk's new Nexus. So they're two of Punk's lackeys. But I had to Google that because I didn't know.
Great job, guys.
WWE's in a real period in this point in time where tag teams are not important. They exist to have guys who we don't really care about, have them have something to do, or to be like temporary filler stories for people who we do care about. It's tag team wrestling isn't important.
So the same sort of like writing tool as with the race war, just like with less like major implications for storylines.
Yeah, it's there to do. It's there to fill out episodes. It's not really there to be important in its own right. And so, but the US title, yeah, it's sad because tag team wrestling can be really fun. I feel like we saw that in AEW.
We saw that last. Well, that's what I meant, because I'm remembering when we watched the 2013 episode. The filler was very obviously filler, and it's kind of like was this period in the middle of the show. It was just kind of like, eh. So going to AEW then, where like all the tag team matches were exciting and everything, like everything felt important. Like going back to this, I'm just gonna be like, damn it.
Yeah, it's sad, but so back to the U.S. title. That is kind of at a consistent feud right now between Dolph Ziggler and Kofi Kingston. Dolph Ziggler, I believe he was in 2013 as a babyface. Now he's kind of he's a heel in 2011, but doing kind of the same character of like the cocky show off Mr. Steal Yo Girl. That's who Vicky Guerrero is managing right now. It is implied that they are banging. It's great.
Of course it is.
Yeah, but
of course it is. Why wouldn't it be?
I know, but he is U.S. champion, and he just beat Kofi Kingston for it. And Kofi Kingston, right now, he's kind of just doing like happy to be there, good guy, babyface kind of character. But he is interesting in that before 2011, when he first came to WWE, the reason his name is Kofi Kingston and the reason his theme is kind of Jamaican sounding, as you'll hear on this episode, is because his character was that he's Jamaican. Except Kofi Kingston isn't Jamaican. He's from Ghana, West Africa. But he did a bad fake Jamaican accent, man. He did a bad fake accent. The story for why
amazing.
The story of how that character went away is the best. Where basically Kofi's mom got like asked in an interview about him by like in some like TMZ kind of thing. I don't remember where exactly. But Kofi's mom got asked about him, and then she was like, "No, he's not Jamaican." And Kofi was like, "Kayfabe, mom, kayfabe." So after that,
Mom,
like, what are you doing? So after that, they just kind of
messing up my kayfabe.
You're messing up my character. So after that, they basically drop the accent and never bring it up again. But he still keeps.
Oh, come on! See, that could have been a funny thing to like do, like say he was faking it the whole time and make a plot out of it for some dumb reason.
They lampshade it once. They have a wrestler be like, "Didn't you used to have a Jamaican accent?" But other than that, they still do that sometimes. They'll like lampshade and make jokes about the time Kofi used to have a Jamaican accent. But other than that, it's not really important anymore. But he still keeps a lot of the same. They still keep all the like aesthetics of that. He's just not Jamaican.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so fine. Why not?
It's fine. Oh, right. Okay, and I guess we have to talk about the Divas storyline, I guess, because that's a thing that exists on this episode. Let's talk about
amazing.
it. Let's talk about it. Last week was a Divas championship match. We got a new champion. And by the way, the match lasted 3 minutes. I counted.
God, of course.
It's great. But the new champion is Kelly, whose gimmick is she's hot and a good guy. We're in peak Divas form right now, where like all the characters are hot, but also bitchy.
Odd. Of course, naturally. Why would we do anything else?
No, what else? What other characters could we have for women, David?
What? Yeah. The Woms having 3-dimensional personality. Not my good Christian WWE server.
Absolutely not. So she's the champion, and she just beat Nikki Bella for the title. And Nikki Bella's character is also hot, but bitchy. But also, there is another wrinkle where there's another wrinkle here where her twin sister Brie is also a wrestler. So for cheaty purposes, sometimes they'll secretly switch places during the match. So like they'll do some distract the ref kind of shenanigans, and then like Brie will sub in for Nikki when nobody notices, or vice versa, and then they win the match. Because the other Bella is the fresher woman, so easy advantage. Trickery.
Yeah.
But Kelly won in a.
Why? I mean. Why just have a cat fight? Well, you can have a cat fight, but it's the Parent Trap.
That's a fantastic out of context quote, I think.
I'm already imagining the future merch we can put it on.
Yep. So yeah, their gimmick. They're just kind of the divas are doing their diva thing at this point in time, I guess.
Good old butterfly belt.
Yep, the butterfly belt is there. It's still there. We're doing great.
Of course it is.
It's
I,
gonna
I
be.
I just want to point out, by the way, I love like the contrast of when we did the first episode, I was all bright eyed and bushy tailed. Like, I obviously had some like preconceptions going in of kind of like what the landscape was like, but I was still like, oh man. And now I'm just here like, yep, this all scans. This is great. This is fine.
Now you know all of the like worst ass elements of WWE.
Yep.
You know what it's gonna be like. You know what it's gonna be like. We're having a good time.
Yeah.
But okay, so two more elements I think that need to be addressed before we can be done with our preview. Number one, who's in charge of Raw right now? I present to you the anonymous Raw general manager angle.
What?
Yeah, I know. Basically, at this point in time, what they would do is by the announcer's table. Oh, excuse me, 3 points of it. I've almost forgot another thing, but back to the Raw general manager. They would, by the announcer's desk, they would have a podium with a laptop on it. And periodically during the show, there would be an obnoxious email, you've got mail-esque ping on the laptop. And one of the announcers would walk over to the podium and read off the email. And that was the Raw general manager. That was who was in charge of the show at this point. I would tell you the payoff to that angle, but I don't think you really want to hear it. It's that bad.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
I suppose if I had to have anything good to say about it, it's better than what was before we did the anonymous Raw general manager angle, which we'll definitely cover this at some point, which was the guest general manager concept. Thanks, Donald Trump in kayfabe. In kayfabe, it's his fault that Raw was like this for like 2 years. Where every week, WWE would have some celebrity host show up like it's SNL, and they would run the show. And they would do skits with the wrestlers. Sometimes they'd even wrestle.
What?
And sometimes it would actually be pretty fun, like Betty White or the Muppets or Bob Barker.
Okay, actually, this
sometimes
just like timeline lines up for like the Muppets comeback, so like sure.
Yeah, sometimes it's not fun, like when Reverend Al Sharpton was there.
What?
I know.
Why? What is the point? Well, okay, I know what the point is, but
it was bad because as you'd expect, most of the time, the celebrity guests didn't really give a crap about any of this. So, you know, and it showed. The times when it was fun was really when the guest host was really into the idea. Like they were real, they just went all in and it was fun.
So people like Betty White or the Muppets getting into it. That makes sense.
Bob Barker got into it. They did a lot.
They
did a lot of Wheel of Fortune parodies. That was funny to do. They did a lot of Wheel of Fortune. Not Wheel of Fortune.
Bob Barker had a surprisingly like good meta sense of humor, and I appreciate it.
But like Hugh Jackman was there, and he had fun with it. Seth Green did a cameo and he had fun with it. You know, that kind of stuff. But then you get people who didn't care, like Jeremy Piven and Ken Jeong were there. I believe they were there for when that wasn't when they did the Entourage movie. I don't remember. They were there. They were there and they mispronounced the name of the pay-per-view they were talking about. They were supposed to talk about.
Oh my god.
Like this is our like range for where it could go.
Brilliant. Beautiful. Awesome. I'm here for it.
Good times. Anyway, back to 2011. So we have the anonymous Raw general manager. we have a theme for this episode. They're in Vegas, which means it's time for the Raw Roulette episode, where basically they spin a roulette wheel, and that's how match types are decided.
I'm assuming same sort of deal as the choose the match type thing from the 2013 episode, where no matter what the roulette wheel says, it doesn't actually change all that much about the structure of the match.
I believe in the roulette wheel they actually rigged it so it came out to what they wanted it to.
Oh well, that also works.
Yeah, but I'm honestly, it's so fun how last week was the special episode where the fans got to choose all the match types, and this episode we get to have a spin a wheel to decide all the match types. We're just,
Lady Luck, baby.
It's great. And they honestly, I kind of miss it a little bit. They eventually stopped doing that every time they went to Vegas, but sometimes it's fun. Oh, right. And then the last thing I want to talk about, we have a new Shut Up Lawler in this episode, and Jerry Lawler is also a commentator.
No, my worst enemy.
Jerry Lawler at this point in his career in PG WWE, now he isn't that big a sexist anymore. But now
I know he's a face commentator now, but
he just does really shitty dad jokes all night. But the real annoyance is Michael Cole. He is the play-by-play announcer, and he's a heel.
Of course, naturally.
And understand that's a very weird thing in wrestling. It's generally the play-by-play announcer is generally at worst neutral, if not an outright babyface supporter.
Yeah.
And I feel like that makes, and I just kind of injecting my own opinion on it. I think that makes the most sense because like the play-by-play guy more than any other announcer is supposed to be kind of like the main narrator and guide of the stories. And if the idea is that you want to cheer the good guys, so should the narrator. I mean, if you read a fairy tale, the narrator isn't going on about how Maleficent is actually super cool and is being cheated out of being invited to the baby shower. You know?
Yeah.
So Michael Cole being the play-by-play heel announcer, it just feels wrong. Also, he's just kind of super obnoxious. And that's real. That makes it the real worst part. Is he's a really good heel character in that he's very obnoxious, and I would like him to stop talking so much.
Oh no.
So, yeah, I think that is our setup for Raw in 2011. You know, this isn't a very you know, I'll talk more. We'll talk about quality after we watch it.
Yeah, it's our exposition segment. We ain't getting into the subjectivity yet.
No, but I am super excited to talk, regardless of the quality of anything else that ends up happening tonight. Because I've never seen it. I don't know how good this episode is. The end thing, there's the one thing I'm very excited to talk about when we get to it.
Oh boy. Oh man, you always give me the fun like ending things to look forward to. It's just Alrighty, let's
then.
do it.
So we're wrapping this up, and we will see you guys in the back half.
Dun, 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 dun.
And we're back. So, I feel like you have to start with the thing that I picked this episode for. For context for people who don't know, or or the date when I mentioned it earlier sounds familiar to you. June 27th, 2011 is the date of the Monday Night Raw episode that we watched, and that is the day of the CM Punk pipe bomb promo, which is what ended the show.
Yeah. Jesus. I mean, yeah, I guess we got to start from the ending here, but like Damn, that episode was one of the ones where I was kind of like, yeah, this isn't crazy like the first episode we watched that had a lot of like it was a lot of fighting with a lot of like different disparate plot threads. But CM Punk was kind of a through line here, and he turned like full on like fucking Macbeth or something in the final in those final minutes. Like I don't like that. That was straight up again, kind of like I talked about the first episode, like straight up Shakespearean, dude. Jesus, he just went off.
He did, and like this was I think I've hinted to David. I don't remember if I talked about it a little bit in the first half, but definitely when I was talking to David about what this episode was going to be like, and what we were probably going to talk about. I was going to talk about how you can talk about kayfabe, and because this whole promo was a giant what would be called a worked shoot, which is for people who don't know the terms, a work is basically when wrestling is fake, and a shoot is when wrestling isn't fake.
Yep.
And a work shoot is when it's fake, but they want you to believe it's legit. And what CM Punk talked about is what makes it a work shoot. For some quick references, he talks about the idea of John Cena getting where he is because he's an ass kisser to Vince McMahon specifically. That's in WWE kayfabe land. John Cena is a 10-time WWE champion because he's the best. He wins the matches. So this notion that he's considered the best just because he glad hands to Vince in real life backstage is not brought up in any real way. He mentions Dwayne. That's The Rock, if you couldn't have figured it out. And he had never been, obviously, but he had never been acknowledged as Dwayne Johnson on WWE television before. Like, that was really the first time that you mentioned his first name like that. Otherwise, he's just The Rock,
Oh.
So that was extremely significant. He mentioned Paul Heyman and Brock Lesnar, which I figured if any of those David wasn't going to get the significance of, it was that one because you remember them from the first episode we watched.
I mean, I remember. Yeah, what was that? That was Lesnar, right?
Yeah, Lesnar who attacked Punk, and then Heyman was who managed Punk at the time. Well, in 2011, both of those guys were kind of persona non grata in WWE. At this point in time, Brock Lesnar was just an ex-wrestler and a current UFC champion. And Paul Heyman was just another guy who used to work for Vince McMahon, but pissed Vince McMahon off enough and he quit because he rubbed everyone the wrong way. So to mention them both, both of them wouldn't make a comeback on WWE TV until 2012, about a year after this promo. So this is like, to mention their names on air is a big deal. He talked.
Oh shit.
Oh yeah, and that's when he's like, doing the fourth wall break. He did do that to the camera, and then he mentioned when he talked about where he's going to go defend the WWE Championship, he mentioned New Japan and Ring of Honor. And in WWE land, only WWE gets mentioned. Like, it's kind of sacrilege to mention mention other current wrestling companies. You can
he mentioned New Japan.
Mm-hmm. Like you can mention companies that don't exist anymore and WWE owns the rights to, like WCW. But like to talk about what would be considered a current competitor is absolutely a no-go. Like you don't talk about that. And he mentioned it. And then of course the real big ending of where he talks about, after he goes on about, how he's not on the advertising, he's not the guy they put on the merchandise and all that. He talks about how he hopes that this company will be better when Vince McMahon is dead, but it won't be because it's going to be run by his idiot's daughter and his stupid son-in-law. It's a whole big can of worms, isn't it? To have.
Yeah. Well, and then he starts to talk about the be a superstar thing, and they cut his
Right.
mic.
Yeah, he's about to do this story about how Vince McMahon charity is bullshit or whatever. That's obviously where that was going. But then they cut his mic, and that's the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was kind of like one of the the best versions of a work shoot you're ever really going to find. And that is why this is such a the Summer of Punk, as it's called, is one of the biggest storylines WWE has in this era, is because that promo blew up.
I can see why. Like, I was actually going to ask you. I wasn't sure if like if that was him like going off script at all.
It wasn't basic. I mean, it's his real feelings, but basically the thing is, basically that whole thing was all like pre-scripted. That's why it's a worked shoot.
Yeah.
But like those are his real feelings, and he touches on things that you don't touch on in WWE TV. So that's why it feels like he's going off script.
Mm-hmm.
But he isn't, but he isn't really, and that's kind of that's a real magic of the work shoot, which I'm going to talk about what I think the magic of that kind of thing is. But I was going to say is that, like, especially when you talk about hardcore internet wrestling fans, oh man, this promo was a revelation. This, like, to see this kind of stuff talked about on WWE TV.
Yeah. Like that's them, like that's WWE effectively turning to the camera and being like, "We get the memes, guys."
Yeah, and it's like, what?
Yeah, which I mean, you said you kind of want to talk about this, but like I think I can, as the noob, even kind of speak to it here, just having experienced it. Like, this it's in a similar vein to kind of how I felt about the Mark Henry thing in the first episode was, like you gave me the context of like IRL, his contract actually was up, and like it wasn't entirely certain whether or not he'd leave or not.
Mm-hmm.
And like they obviously play that up for dramatic effect throughout this whole thing, to kind of give him like a sort of Damocles to hang over the rest of his contemporaries, and the company itself.
Mm-hmm.
But he played that final monologue well enough that it did kind of make me question whether or not like this was reflective of like in like planned scripting about his like potential leave, or if this was him like being like, fuck it, I have the mic, I have nothing else to lose since I might be leaving soon. This is almost my way of like taking the company to task to say, either you guys get good or I actually am out of here, like IRL, out of kayfabe, like right. Buck up here.
And like, I will say that, like, from what we do know about how this played out, it kind of does play out a little bit like that, you know. And this is a way for the wrestling kind of reality bleeds into the wrestling, which bleeds into reality, kind of aspect of it all. That, like, yeah, Punk's contract was up, and he wasn't sure. He really wasn't sure if he was going to re-sign or not. Obviously, the fact that we saw him in 2013 suggests he does eventually, but
well, yeah.
But at the time, he didn't know, and he kind of wasn't sure if he wanted to wrestling for WWE or not. But he pitches this storyline on the way as a way to leave, as like his like final story in WWE. Whether and like he pitches this idea of like saying these kind of things and seemingly going off script and kind of attacking WWE in a real way, based on like real things, not just fake bullshit storyline stuff that they come up with for TV. And it just caught like wildfire. But like Vince McMahon signed off on it, let him kind of do whatever he wanted to do with it, and then he did it, and it caught like and it kind of set the internet ablaze.
So Punk So Punk pitched this like this was his idea.
Yes, this whole storyline was Punk's idea.
Dang.
How much
influence? How much influence can wrestlers have over their storylines?
It depends. Basically, I'll break it down in kind of the simplest way. For WWE, you know, if you're a newer person, you really don't have any control. I mean, you can obviously make suggestions and they can go with it or not, but you're otherwise going to be basically like
Yeah.
doing what they tell you. Someone like Punk, who is a longtime veteran, a kind of a bigger star, he has more say over these kind of things. And then WWE doesn't do that anymore because it opens up a huge can of worms writing wise. But historically, there have been wrestlers who had creative control in their contracts that basically said, I have
Ooh.
veto power over anything I do. If I don't want to do if I don't want to do this storyline, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
So Punk was pretty much he was trusted enough by the creative writers in WWE that he was allowed to just kind of pitch this whole thing and kind of come up with it himself. And I don't and I think he took a lot of. I don't mean to take away from the storyline because the WWE one is really good in its own right, but it is a bit of a playoff. If he did a very similar storyline in Ring of Honor, he mentioned that he wrestled in Ring of Honor before he came to WWE, but he did a similar storyline where he signed with WWE and then won the Ring of Honor championship and did a very similar like I'm with your belt, assholes. The most famous moment being when in the middle of the ring in Ring of Honor, he signed his WWE contract on the Ring of Honor world title.
Oh my God.
And in Ring of Honor, especially at that time period, it was very much an anti-WWE environment. And so, like, he got mega hated for that, for being like, I'm going to WWE, fuck all of y'all. Like, it was a real, like, you sold out kind of moment.
Oh my. Yeah, Jesus.
So, yeah.
I gotta say, I'm digging heel Punk.
Oh, no, heel Punk is incredible. I think that there is a version of babyface Punk that works, of having looked at his whole career, but definitely heel Punk is something special, I think.
Dude, I mean, well, because watching him in the Del Rio match in the first episode, he was just kind of there. Like, he was big and proud and righteous, just your standard babyface, fair, nothing special about it. But, like, this dude turned into a freaking, like, I hate to keep like I kind of hate to keep beating a dead horse in terms of my like kind of tougher era, but he turned into like a Shakespeare villain here. Like this is a dude who like who has like this diabolical plan, and he plays it so extremely well. Like there's not a stilted line delivery here. He got on that mic and spat fire.
Absolutely. Like he's telling you what his plan is going to be, and he is going to try his best to follow through with it. And this episode we don't get a lot of interaction with Cena, but I will say, spoilers ahead for the next time we do this storyline, he does get his chance to take his shots at John Cena in particular, outside of this notion of him being an ass kisser and overrated.
Yeah.
He's going to have a lot more direct confrontation and dialogue with Cena going forward. But this episode,
that's awesome.
But this episode was all about, the pipe bomb promo as it would become known as. And him dropping
2010's WWE does seem to really like thrive off of its like big mega endings, at least in the episodes I've seen. Like like they at the very least know how to end episodes. Like it's much this kind of like playing these unique sort of climaxes. It wasn't quite nearly as built to as the Mark Henry talking about like potential retirement like all episode, but Punk showing up at the beginning, Punk showing up at the end during Cena's fight with R-Truth. He definitely had his moments. And every little bit of it was played off extremely well, and he does a very good job at playing this kind of loose cannon energy. Where like I even commented to you at one point, like he seems drunk right now. Like when he was like, I'm breaking the fourth wall. It doesn't feel. He does a very good job at not making it feel scripted. It feels off the wall.
Mhm.
And that is
that's very much
that is a skill.
and that's very much what Punk was going for. You know, his character was very, you know, if you look at kind of his heel character through the ages, a lot, it's very much this idea of like, I'm say like you can't really ever you don't know what I'm gonna say. Like like someone who's willing to say anything, someone who's willing to tell any truth, someone who's willing to offend any person, and so you just don't know what he's gonna say next.
Wild card, bitches. But like, but seriously, like,
Yeah.
like I, I like even just shouting out that awesome little moment where he mocked Cena's "You Can't See Me," like there was reckless abandon in his eyes. Like he was that seemed like he was legit reveling in the moment. Like this is a man who clearly loves getting to play the villain, and does a very very good job at it. Which makes perfect sense how he was able to blow up the internet with the work shoot that he gave here, because it was off the wall, and it was really something special.
Yeah. And something I have wanted to mention about like the idea of the work shoot. And I think because there is a way to make it go very badly. If you want an example of that, I would look to WCW in the year 2000. Vince Russo, bro, I've mentioned him a few times. I've talked about Vince Russo more than I thought I would on this podcast already. But you know, I did mention on the episode 4 that when we talked about the 90s episode, Vince Russo did have this kind of attitude about wrestling fans, this idea that like they're all on the internet and they all kind of know the backstage stuff, and they want to see that incorporated more in the wrestling show. And I don't necessarily agree, but you know, I do think in '97 there was a lot more. You know, when he talks about like bringing reality into wrestling, it was a lot more subtle and interesting, like the way that Vince McMahon started having a more prominent role on TV. 2000 WCW, when he was head writer there, was a lot less so. Like you would have these moments where they literally talk about the script. Like they had a match where a guy refused to take the finishing move and just walks off, and the announcers are like, "What? That's not in the script. What do we do? That's not in my like. What's
oh?"
And it's like, and it's kind of
okay.
Yeah, like not even just like winking and nudging at the idea that it's fake, just straight up saying it is, and that there is a script.
That feels kind of forced.
Yes, and I think a big reason why I think stuff like CM Punk's promo works in this episode, and along with another storyline that works really well, is that it can exist if you don't, and it can work if you don't know anything about what is going on backstage.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why I really wanted to show this to you, because you're like, you've watched a little bit of wrestling, and so like you have some of this stuff you can kind of grasp why it's so like controversial and big for him to say it. But you're not as in tune with like all of the backstage happenings and the behind the scenes stuff in wrestling. And at least for me, I've always kind of looked at that promo as like, it can still kind of work if you don't really know what's going on, and it makes sense in a storyline sense. Like nothing he says, but obviously he does the "ha, I'm breaking the fourth wall" gag, but you know, outside of that, nothing he says doesn't make sense in the fictional story world of WWE.
Well, like I can even see like the fourth wall thing like making sense outside of because like as long as you know like what the fourth wall is, you can least acknowledge, like in any TV show, you're not really supposed to like look directly at the camera.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like it's not like he said, oh shit, I'm breaking kayfabe. He like
Yeah,
fourth wall. I feel like is a different connotation.
yeah. So like he's very clearly leaning on what our conception of kayfabe is, but he's not really breaking it. Not really. Everything he says can
Hmm.
be justified in kayfabe, and I think for a work shoot to work, it has to be that way. Like
Yeah,
it has to make sense in storyline. You can't just do shit like, oh, he's going off the script.
yeah, no, or like even or like if you did, you
Mm-hmm.
would have to make it so that like it's so over the top that it's just like it just seems like this person
It's
absolutely
weird
losing their shit, and
farce.
B, you still or like or like just a complete
Mm-hmm.
like mental breakdown of a character,
Mm-hmm.
and then even then I feel like you would still need to, in order for it to like really work long term, you need to find a way, you need to like basically give yourself an out to salvage somebody taking just this extreme like off script feeling thing,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like even if it's like really kind of off the wall, you need to be able to salvage it in some way. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like Punk's promo, it feels real in the sense that it doesn't feel the same way as like a regular fictional wrestling thing is, even though it is another fictional wrestling thing. And like another
Yeah.
example I have is that, Daniel Bryan in his storyline to become a WWE champion. And in 2013, he has a storyline about this, and he butts heads with the Authority, which is that idiot daughter and doofus son-in-law mentioned by Punk, Stephanie McMahon and Triple H. They are kind of
Yeah.
presented as the on-screen authority figures on the show, and they're constantly screwing Daniel Bryan out of the title on the justification of like, you're a good wrestler, Daniel. You're a B+ player, but you don't have the look of a champion. You're not marketable.
Mhm.
You don't have the
Yeah.
personality. And obviously that all makes sense in storyline as bullshit justifications, because what they really want is a champion who is a lapdog to them that Daniel Bryan isn't.
Hmm.
But it works so well at the time because this idea that Daniel Bryan is too short, he is not conventionally attractive enough, he's not muscular enough, he doesn't have the right personality, is things that wrestling fans thought the McMahons actually think about Daniel Bryan IRL. It's leaning
Yeah.
on actual fan perceptions of what Daniel Bryan is to the back to the people in charge, but adding it into the storyline. And that's another. It's not quite a worked shoot. It's more of like a leaning on kayfabe kind of thing. But I think that's why it works so well, is because it fits in storyline as well as kind of touching on real stuff.
Yeah. It seems almost as if like this stuff is
Mm-hmm.
um working because I'm trying to find the right way, because it's kind of like this kind of twisted backwards thing, but like it almost feels as though like the fact that they're basically able to take the fact that the fans know like there's like backstage stuff that's scripted, and like that
Mm-hmm.
there's like backstage stuff that doesn't match what's going on, like you
Mm-hmm.
know in ring in kayfabe.
Mm-hmm.
They're taking that and basically like using it, manipulating its head to then still be able to kind of confuse the fans and blur the lines a little bit on what's real and what's not, which is a pretty impressive thing to do. Like that's some 4D chess right there when it comes to your writing.
It is, and it's something I think is relatively unique to wrestling, because I think it's relatively unique to wrestling because it takes place in our reality in a sense. Like it's not so obviously not real in the way that TV and movies are very obviously not real. Like it has more of a sense
Yeah.
of reality to it, and it feels more like the audience, is part of it all, that allows you to kind of weave these narratives that is blending what is real and what isn't real, and kind of keeping you on your toes about where that line is.
Mm-hmm.
Even if in the end it is all not real. Even if in the end none of it's real. But you still feel like some of it is real.
And it tricks you just enough. And I think it tricks you in a different way than the Mark Henry thing, where it kind of like suckered you in with like this fake sense of sentimentality. It's that they, and part of it again is thanks to Punk's thing. But they're able to play it up just enough to the point where this guy legitimately does feel like a bit of a loose cannon. It was like the moment where they cut his mic, like if you think about it for more than 5 seconds, like of course that's like, you know, such a scripted thing to do.
Like why would they not have cut
you know, right before he's able to.
If this was real, why would they not cut it before?
Yeah, why would they like why is Vince McMahon just sitting there like, I will allow it up until like a certain point. But that's not a thing that tends to happen. You know, the wrestlers don't really tend to get their mics cut, at least not from what I've seen so far.
No, they don't. Your mic being cut off is a very rare occurrence as a wrestling trope. Extremely.
Yeah. So like, if you think about it for more than 5 seconds, like, of course it's fake as hell, but it's enough of a shock in the moment that it kind of jolts you for a second. You're like, okay. Like, I guess this is like what's gonna happen now? Like, this is a loose cannon who just got his mic cut. Like, what's gonna happen? Shit.
Right.
And it kind of leaves on this cliffhanger almost, because he doesn't really do anything in the moment, but he's almost like, I'll be backing, like, you know, yelling out without his mic.
Yeah, he's like, I'll be back, and he's also kind of like, you're proving my point.
Yeah. Which again is this great way to kind of mess with audience expectations a little bit.
Like you're proving my point. I keep saying that I'm being held back by the people really in charge of this company, and what do you know? They cut off my mic before I really disparage Vince McMahon's character.
Yeah. Which I mean, I will say, like, they did leave it off at a good point of, like, it seemed like, you know, if he's gonna target the anti-bullying campaign, like, that's something that could be really deep cutting, and that's when they cut it, and you're like, oh, what was he gonna say?
Yeah.
It kind of does kind of leave you like, oh, what's going on?
You know, it's like, it's one thing to be like, yeah, Vince McMahon's an idiot boss, blah, blah, blah. But then he's about to say something about how, you know, WWE's charity efforts are bullshit. And it's like, whoa.
Whoa,
there.
We were allowing you to go on for a while, but buddy,
we gotta stop this right now.
So that was a fantastic end to this match. Certainly not what I was expecting, with you kind of teasing like it's the finale you really wanted me to see. Like I certainly wasn't expecting it to be like this monologue that CM Punk gave, but yeah, it was effective, and dude played it extremely well, and I didn't give enough credit back in the first episode to, I guess, I think how good a wrestler he is, like, in ring, but B, how good a performer he is, because I think he's just wasn't given good material.
I mean, yeah, I don't blame you. There's a lot of good stuff on that first episode we watched, but Punk's stuff wasn't really it. Like this, like he didn't really have something great to sink his teeth into in that episode.
Which I will say, like, I don't know if this is more just me getting more of an appreciation for the craft, or if there's an actual discernible difference, but it did seem like a lot of the in-ring work too in this was a bit more impressive to me. I don't like again, I don't know if that's just because like last time we watched WWE, it was my first ever time seeing any wrestling thing ever, so I wasn't really in tune with how this stuff tended to run. But a lot of those matches did play off
Mhm.
in pretty impressive ways. Like I noticed a lot of kind of cool moves, whether they be coming out of CM Punk.
Mhm.
The Del Rio match, it wasn't so much Del Rio himself in that match. It was more like, Mark Henry actually just showing off his brute strength like a freaking monster. Whether it be
Mhm.
the Sin Cara match,
Mhm.
just the two high flyers going at it. Um,
Mhm.
the in ring work here was legitimately really impressive, to a point that I was kind of surprised for, like, early 2010s WWE to show off
I mean, I'm with you on
across
that
the
as
board.
I'm with you on that as well. I was kind of pleasantly surprised by this episode as a whole. Like, obviously, the Punk thing overshadows pretty much anything else that happened here, but like going in, I had pretty low expectations because 2011 isn't necessarily considered a very good period in WWE's history. And when I was researching this kind of stuff online, people were kind of like, "This episode isn't that great outside of the end." But I enjoy, but I found that I thought the episode was a lot more enjoyable overall than I really expected it to be, and maybe that is an expectations thing.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't feel momentous. It kind of, for a
Mm-hmm.
lot of it, it felt like the Madison Square Garden episode,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like not a whole lot feels like it's happening. Like obviously there's a lot of like plot stuff that's kind of going on,
Right. But
um,
I
but it
think
doesn't
that's
get played up
mhm.
nearly to the extent.
And I think it's because of the gimmick of the episode. Like
Yeah,
like because they decided to make this episode all about, we're in Vegas, the Raw Roulette, everything is, you never know what kind of match you're gonna
which
have.
like
It didn't feel like a lot of plot
but
actually
like they
progressed.
didn't even like they played the Vegas thing up a lot less too than I would have anticipated. Like aside from the roulette, like they didn't ever like lean in. Like you didn't ever see anyone like in a tux, like making jokes about going and high rolling or anything. It seems like they for as much as they had the Wheel of Fortune, it wasn't like they didn't lean into the Vegas theming as much as I thought they would. But that being said, like it was still kind of entertaining. Like Booker T made for a fantastic, entertaining host. The Shawn Michaels stuff was vaguely entertaining, just in the matter of like, what the fuck is Shawn Michael doing here?
No,
um, uh,
he's here to hawk his shit and do nothing else.
yeah. There was and kick people in the face.
Yep.
Yeah, it was. I mean, uh, uh, the it wasn't like it didn't feel heavily plotted like the 2013 episode did,
Mhm.
but all of the little like inserts were fun diversions.
Mhm.
um there was the opening with the Michael Punk promo
Interaction.
cut. There was, there was Vicky just being Vicky.
No, Vicky was hilarious.
uh
Between where she forces herself into to spin the wheel, and then she like has to get dragged off when they're like, "All right, you can't be at this match. You got to stay in the back."
Excuse me.
Excuse
Excuse
me.
me.
Now she's no.
I
There's
love.
a real. There's a there that takes me back, doesn't it?
Oh man, no. I honestly, I get a huge kick out of Vicky.
Mhm.
Just seeing that she's like starting here as this kind of like integer character, and then later on she goes on to be beleaguered middle management who just like cannot catch a break. I I find it kind of amusing that they use Vicky as an avatar of just every like Karen you've ever disliked or ever had a bad interaction with. And it's really entertaining. She's this great kind of like comedic side character who just gets to show up and be mid show diversion every now and then. And it's great. I'm here for it. The shtick hasn't gotten old for me yet.
Absolutely. Um, let's get going through the masses of this episode is like I guess I hate to just go in order because that's kind of very boring to do. I guess the next biggest thing
I
that
mean,
happened. I guess the next biggest stuff of this episode, outside of all the Punk stuff, is I guess you do the Mark Henry Big Show match segment because that was the other thing
Yeah,
we kept calling back to.
I mean, there wasn't the thing is it doesn't feel like there's much to talk about there.
Mm-hmm.
Like sure we can kind of get into like I mean, because it's stuff we've touched on before, just Del Rio being a rich prick, except this time he has a car and this time it's not.
Yeah,
He doesn't hate America. Uh, but I mean, the real fun part was, I mean, the felling the giant sort of formula is,
mm-hmm.
it's just kind of it is what it is. But then Mark Henry coming in and just legitimately like tearing off parts of the
He
cage
rips
was
he
it's
rips
just an
the
impressive like
yeah, no, he rips the door off the cage so he can get in the ring,
yeah,
and then he like slams Big Show through the cage wall so that it
using the
collapses.
door that he tore off.
Yeah.
He makes a cage sandwich
Mhm.
um uh out of Big Show. And I mean, that's the big thing to talk about there is just that, man, Mark Henry is fucking scary. Like, this is a man who I do not want to get on the bad side of because he would, like, tear me apart.
Absolutely, and it almost feels it's so weird, honestly, to think about like his career trajectory because like he's seemingly always been capable of this, but until 2011 he really didn't put it all together and like becomes this person.
Yeah,
It's kind of like leans into this like I am this world's strongest man. I can. It doesn't matter who you are. I can destroy you and do whatever I want to you. So I'm gonna do that.
yeah. And a lot of it is just chalked up to his phenomenal physicality, both
Mhm.
obviously as being legitimately this strong. We were kind of talking like the cage was smaller than you see for most cage matches, and we kind of
No,
realized, oh,
it
that's
felt
so
very short.
it's set up like that, so yeah, it's set up like that so Mark Henry can tear it apart. But that
Right.
being said, it didn't look super rigged up. Like obviously, kind of how he was able to snap the door off makes it look a little rigged, and
Mhm.
probably the way the way the one like cage wall just kind of like flew
No,
off. That was
obviously
probably rigged
not.
up a little
And
bit.
absolutely, like for that one wall to come apart like that it's definitely a rig job.
But that being said,
Mhm.
people still hit the walls during
Yeah.
Del Rio and Big Show still hit the walls during this match. And I don't
Mhm.
know if it was like they just had like one wall that was
Yeah,
specifically rigged up that he was like,
they set that up so that
don't
like
touch.
yeah, they're like this wall is rigged to fall apart, so don't do that. So don't hit that one.
But but you don't kind of realize that
Mhm.
it's you're not like paying attention to, oh, are they hitting every single panel on the wall? No, you just see Mark Henry tear off the door and use it to yeet Big Show through the cage.
Mhm.
And well, obviously it is rigged up. There's still clearly this level of strength that it would take to get those rigged. Um, and it just was terrifyingly
Mhm.
realistic feeling. And Mark Henry is very good at just, again, kind of like CM Punk, just playing this very unhinged. Um, uh, I don't even know like how to describe it, but just this complete like hulking psychopath. Who just does not care what's in his way. He'll just barrel through it.
Mhm.
Um, and this it again, it's nothing, it's not like the level of visual metaphor that we had going on in AEW last week.
Mhm.
But the visuals are there, and they're powerful ones, I think, or at least somewhat, because
Mhm.
again, you don't typically see uh dude bro ripping off the door of a cage in a
Mhm.
cage match. Like that just doesn't tend to happen.
And 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 even if Big Show in his long career, obviously you've seen him, be physically compromised before. It's still very much a visual shock to see a dude as large as the Big Show is be kind of just so easily manhandled by another person.
Yeah, And I mean, I think I honestly think they kind of overplayed their hand a little bit by carrying him out on a stretcher. Like that
Mhm.
felt a little like hokey, because like
You
if
know
they're
he's
calling
fine. You
back
know
to it
he's
like they are,
fine.
and he's fine. Like like that feels like overplaying the hand a little bit. Like yeah, we
Mhm.
get it. Um, but everything up to that point, it's it is kind of this cool thing to see, just like Mark Henry completely Hulk out and not and barrel through Big Show like he's nothing, despite the fact that again he is as giant as Andre the Giant was.
Mhm.
This is knocking him down is no easy feat, even for the strongest man in the world. And yet Mark Henry barrels through him like it's nothing, and it is a cool moment to see. I think this is an episode that very much was at its strongest when it was giving us the sorts of imagery that we don't normally see.
Mhm.
Um, its strongest moments were when shit happens that just normally does not happen, and I think
Mhm.
that was a pretty cool thing for when
Yeah.
it did occur in this episode.
Yeah. And I'm trying to I was trying to think through like what makes this different than the time we watched the episode in 1997, because I think you could make a lot of you could make a lot of interesting comparisons to that episode and this one, in this very sense of like, not it doesn't feel like a lot of things happen except for like one or two big things. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a big difference is it like is that's part of it, is what you mentioned, is that there's a lot of interesting like visual happenings in this episode that kind of make it more interesting to watch, even if objectively there's not a lot of plot advancing here than what we saw in 97, which did not have nearly, I don't think, as
Mm.
interesting, imagery and moments outside
No,
of the one big one.
no, like yeah, it it was it the '90s one felt very by the book,
Mm-hmm.
just a shortened version of the book. Whereas
Right.
this, it had its surprise moments that helped it
Mm-hmm.
stick out. And again, I think part of it too is like again surprisingly good show of athleticism from pretty much everybody involved. Like I already mentioned again, like this the Sin Cara match, high flyer against high flyer. That was phenomenal to see.
Mm-hmm.
And as you kind of said, Sin Cara didn't really have any botch jobs in this
Right.
fight, despite the fact that he's in a very visually restrictive mask in fucking yellow lighting,
Yeah, like
dim yellow lighting. He actually
yeah,
pulled
like
this one off.
yeah, we didn't talk about it in the first half because I didn't really mention Sin Cara, but like, yeah, he's a very athletic wrestler, but he has this very bad reputation about for like making mistakes in the ring and kind of slipping up and messing up moves. And a big part of that is because his mask isn't very good to see out of, and he has to, at this point in time, his whole shtick is that he wrestles in this yellow lighting, in this dramatic mood lighting that makes it even harder to see.
It's just again, it baffles me. Just just like that's how to waste your performer 101 is just
Mhm.
like how can you be that inept in setting up how he's supposed to do things. I
Mhm.
do not get it. Aside from
Mhm.
the fact that I guess he was a bit of a dick about not wanting to learn English. Like
Yeah,
that's the only reason I can justify it in my mind, like why they didn't seem to like give a shit about him really.
yeah, they there was a yeah, there to get into some of the backstage drama with him, is there was is he was is is he could not speak any English, and he also wasn't very interested in learning to speak English. And there was also this sense of I didn't really talk about it when we watched it, but there was also this sense of kind of like a drama queen aspect of him, because WWE does have a developmental system at this point in time, even if it wasn't televised. But he was super insistent about not, like, I'm not doing no developmental stuff. Like I'm like almost like I'm too good for that attitude, even if it's just simple. And I would argue there's at least some value in a develop, even if you're like a seasoned veteran of wrestling. I think it could be valuable to at least take a little bit of time to acclimate yourself to like what WWE wants from you, because you know
Yeah.
Like get a better sense of like, okay, in WWE, this is kind of how it all works. And at the very least, even if you don't really think that that's what you should do, what you need, it at least makes you look better and more of a team player to everybody else if you agree to it.
Yeah.
And so
yeah.
he kind of managed to like he kind of burned a little bit of the bridges a little bit, and that definitely didn't help.
Which, yeah, so I get it, but for this episode, his in-ring work was phenomenal.
It was,
and it was cool to see him pulling off the moves that he did.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them actually, like that was just a well fought match.
Yeah, Evan Bourne is an incredibly
not a whole lot to commentate on, but
right. No, Evan Bourne is very incredible.
I mean,
and he'll kind of find his own niche as a wrestling character, at least to me. And later on, when he leaves WWE and kind of more leans into the fact that the dude is a heavy stoner, and so he starts leaning a little bit more into the fact that he's a drug addict and starts talking about he's like open your third eye kind of shit. And I think that's kind of where he peaks as a character in wrestling, but. Even now, even when he's just kind of this smiley do-gooder kind of guy, you can still see he's very talented and very athletic and fun to watch.
Yeah, which I think I think what can sort of make these more fillery feeling matches to me is if there are like fun displays of athleticism in them, and something like this, it's obviously not up to the same level as something like the AEW match where just two just very like the tag team match where we had two strong boys versus two like basically telepathic high flyer luchadors, but it was still like two men who were clearly very competent.
And I'd argue you can't even, because not even outside of the fact that one was significantly longer than the other, this doesn't have any real stakes to it in the same way that the tag team title match did, but it was still very enjoyable as a filler match.
Yeah, it did what it was supposed to do. Or I think what's sort of the more straight up matches in WWE or other or any pro wrestling should do is just show off two athletically gifted people performing this very impressive kind of. I don't want to keep calling it a dance because it just feels like it feels trite after a while, but this very complex routine of kind of interwoven athletic performances, and this pulled that off very well. It was a similar thing with the tornado tag team match we had here.
Oh yeah,
throw Rey Mysterio into the match.
And even outside of Mysterio, I had a lot more fun with that match than I thought I would, considering I'm not the biggest fan of Jack Swagger or Alex Riley. So I wasn't really expecting.
Yeah, really, I couldn't tell.
I mean, I just kind of find both of them kind of boring as wrestlers, and so I wasn't really expecting to enjoy that match very much when I saw it. But I did have a lot of fun with it. I think everybody played off each other well.
For our audience's context, Austin spent a majority of that match just making digs at Alex Riley for being boring and not ever winning a championship.
I did.
He was going off on the poor guy. I almost felt bad for him.
I did kind of talk a lot of shit about Alex Riley. I would apologize to him, but it's not like
Austin went into that match like, I'm about to end this man's whole career. But yeah, it I mean, but no, it was really cool to watch. Like everybody did pretty good work there. Riley pulled off some surprisingly good moves. The Miz pulled off some surprisingly good moves. Swagger was just, he was just being a strong boy. It wasn't, again, not as all out as the tag team match we saw last week, but still, for what it was, it felt like a nice back and forth the whole time. Again, Mysterio has this very kind of unique aesthetic to his in-ring form that leads to some pretty cool things. Especially like he uses his stature to an advantage. Did significantly shorter than most of his contemporaries, but he uses that very much to his advantage to kind of like swing around people, pull off some really cool flips off the rope. Kind of wriggle his way out of some tougher situations that bigger dudes just can't. And he's clearly very adept at kind of throwing his own weight around. Cool thing to watch in general. And then mix it in with just the three other guys all kind of wailing on each other. It just made for kind of a fun bit of viewing. Even if like none of these are characters who at the moment are particularly compelling in their own rights.
No, and they don't have any real plot to speak of because this is kind of the worst part about Money in the Bank season is because it's hard to tell a compelling story with like 8 dudes who like it's hard to have have it so interwoven that it all works. So you get a lot of these guys are just kind of fighting each other as kind of in preparation for the fact that they're all going to fight each other, but this time in a ladder match.
Yeah, but at least with a match like this where they pull it off as well as they do, it gives you something to look forward to with that ladder match where you can say, okay, these are guys who, if you put them together in a ring, they will play off each other well, and you'll get a decent bit of entertainment. And then you make it a Money in the Bank match, and the MacGuffin will kind of add that last little bit of energizing stakes to make sure that we're having a good time with this.
Absolutely. And that's kind of the goal of those matches, is to kind of be like a teaser for like what's going to happen in, I guess by this time, about 3 weeks at Money in the Bank.
Yeah. So it's just fun.
Yeah. Speaking of the opposite of fun, I guess the Divas the Divas match. Remember the opposite of fun is. I feel like we have to mention it.
No, I know. I'm kidding. It's just like, God damn it.
Well, I'll put it like this: the amount, the time we spent hand wringing over the fact that we have to talk about that match is longer than the match.
And also I should put it in perspective. This isn't as bad as women were treated in the 80s or 90s with this damn company. This isn't as bad. This isn't as bad. This isn't as bad. Okay. It's in perspective. We're okay.
All right. So the match was shit because it was only a minute and a half.
with two wrestlers whose entire personalities are, as you put it, hot or hot and bitchy. Well, I guess 3 wrestlers, but somehow only 2 of them were wrestling this time.
But yeah, there were only 2 wrestlers. It was Kelly, which is I cracked a few jokes with David about this. Is that like Kelly is somehow faker than her real name, which already sounds fake, which is Barbie Blank. And
I mean, at least I kept the alliteration.
Yeah, and I hate to be too mean to Kelly in the sense that, number 1, she's a nice person in real life, and 2, it's not entirely her fault that this is the way this is right now. She is as much a product.
No,
she is as much a product of her environment in terms of both like what opportunities women were given and what kind of training women were given in WWE at the time. But that doesn't mean she's good.
Oh God,
yeah, and she fought. I think it was Nikki Bella. I'm pretty sure that was the belt. That was the correct one. But yeah, literally it was a submission match. Which, if isn't what it sounds, you have to use a submission move and make your opponent tap out. It started,
which I made the comment to Austin. I will give them this. They had the self-restraint because it was the Vegas wheel, and you spun for every single match. At the very least, they had the self-restraint to not make it something like a pillow fight match or a song and dance match. But I still want to know what the hell a song and dance match even looks like.
They had on the wheel, so it could have happened, but
it could have.
But so the match is the match in its entirety. Nikki Bella puts Kelly in an armbar. Kelly fights out of it. Kelly puts Nikki in a Boston Crab, but Nikki taps out. There you go.
Yeah. It was what would you clock it at?
A minute 21. And
a minute. Wait, just a straight up. I thought it was like a
minute and a half, basically.
A minute and a half, 90 seconds, my friends, of lady wrestling in this whole thing.
And like, I feel like it's hard to it might not be easy to understand if you don't really watch wrestling. And so, like, for example, a 90-minute fight in MMA, not a big deal. But like in wrestling, you can have short matches that are really good, but you still need some degree of but wrestling is kind of a form of storytelling, and you still kind of need time to tell a story of something.
There was no well that was the thing. There was no story. There was no interesting work happening to justify the lack of a story.
Yep, pretty much. And like, yeah, like there is such a thing as too short of a match to be good. And 90 seconds is definitely too short. And
it's at the very least it straddles that line. Like I'm sure if you had a match that was just two people just wailing on each other for 90 seconds and it was just total insanity short, but this isn't what it was. Again,
no.
It's just Vince McMahon making hot ladies cat fight because I don't know, I guess that's what the demographic likes to see for some reason.
Yeah.
Did anybody like this? Did anybody ever like this?
People dug it in the 90s. And that's really where the birth of this kind of thing comes from. You want to plot that out because WWE women's wrestling in WWE. Let's plot this out a little bit. In the 80s, you brought in you had a few women's wrestlers. They generally weren't good, except for some exceptions, but they were never featured very much. In the early to mid 90s, you have actual good women's wrestling. WWE just imported a bunch of women from Japan and threw them on TV, and fuck, they were good. Who could have fucking guessed?
Imagine that. Yeah.
Anyway, but then WWE stopped caring, and so that went kaput. And then in the 90s, to fit the era and fit the aesthetic, it was a lot of like hiring hot women to catfight each other. And then it never really stopped being that for a decade. and a decade and some change. And you would have women who kind of break through the mold a little bit and actually be good. But it was not indicative of but that isn't indicative of the division as a whole.
Yeah, no, it's just I don't know why they were still dragging this on. Like, just from what you say, nobody ever seemed to enjoy it by the time it reached this part of the era. So why? Like, I know, like 2014 is when we had our renaissance of good lady wrestling in WWE, which is awesome. But like, Jesus Christ, how did it take that long? Like, this seems to be nobody's cup of tea.
Because I think it's because I think it's because it was kind of not seen as important anyway. So like, who cares if nobody likes it? But there were people backstage who liked it the way it is, and not just Vince. This isn't completely on him. This is John Laurinaitis, who was kind of name dropped by CM Punk in the promo tonight. He was a big executive in the company as the head of talent relations, which is what it sounds like. And it was his kind of idea to like hire fitness models to train them to wrestle. And so he was a big reason for why women's wrestling was like that at this time period. So it's
okay.
So I think it's a lot of complicated things, and I guess I can just be thankful that if you look in other places, things were better by this point. TNA had their Knockouts division, which is what they called their women's division, was by this point kind of renowned as being good, as being where you find good women's wrestling in America. And the indie scene for women was pretty strong. And obviously if you go to Japan, women's wrestling has always been taken very seriously in Japan, in Japanese wrestling culture, so that it's never been shit over there.
Mm-hmm.
But
And now we have it pretty reliably good across the board. But Jesus,
yeah. But at this point in time, it is not fun to get through.
no, it's. I mean, hey, at least it's short.
At least, I suppose so. At least it is short because it could be worse. We could have done that match for like 10 minutes.
For as much of a sin for as much as a sin that it's short, it's also such a blessing, because if that shit dragged on, this would be a much more painful thing to talk about than it is.
Yeah.
As it is, it's just kind of like it's just kind of how it rolls, baby.
How it goes. Okay.
By the way, I still contend that not letting Elizabeth, throwing back to the 80s for a second, not letting Elizabeth ever get into the ring was a huge mistake, and that if we had that timeline, women's wrestling would never ever be bad ever. Just saying.
I feel. I'm trying to think if they had her wrestle in WCW. That feels like something they would have done, but I can't. I'm blanking.
I don't know. It's just one of those things of like you're the wife for a decent time of Randy Savage. I don't know. That's not what we're talking about. It's just like I really like fantasizing about that world where like Elizabeth just says fuck all this and
becomes a super successful wrestler and the best wrestler of all time.
Yeah, it'd be amazing. Anyway, but yeah, so that's a thing. They at the very least, it seems like from what you've told me backstage, the lady wrestlers were actually all pretty nice people.
Yeah, and they were, and like some of them at this point in time, they were advocating for more. So it wasn't just a case of a lack of talent, though that is a problem in certain areas. But it was also a case where women at this time were advocating for more. Those of them who knew they were better than what time they were allowed to show off on TV were like, hey man, hey. Give me more time on TV. We can make this work. And we're just told, nope, we're good. 2 minutes is 2 minutes out of a 2-hour broadcast is a perfectly acceptable amount of time for women to be on TV.
Yeah, on our WWE TV. Ugh.
That's good.
Yeah, sure.
So, I guess if we're just going to keep talking about things that were annoying, you got to see our AOL Messenger general manager.
I will say it wasn't nearly as painful as I thought it would be. It's just kind of there.
I'm just glad he only showed up. He only did it once. I'm glad they only did it one time in the episode.
So it's not an uncommon thing that he'll drop more than one email during a show.
Yeah, he'll do it. He'll do it more than once. So I'm glad that we got the one time, and it's like, okay, goodbye, shut up.
Yeah, okay.
And Cole was bad today.
Yeah, Cole. I was pleasantly surprised. Wasn't actually that annoying.
I've seen a lot worse from him, and so I was expecting a lot worse.
Yeah, I'm sure. But I didn't It wasn't like the 90s where I just literally felt compelled to tell Lawler to shut the fuck up the entire time. This time I was like, okay, this guy, I don't quite get him because he's a heel commentator, but he's again, like I was talking about, he's concerned for Riley's morality, and I don't know. His MO is just kind of confusing to me at this point, but I wasn't ever actively annoyed with him.
Yeah.
The only actively annoyed thing I ever got was seeing that Lawler still has his goddamn crown, because of course he does.
Yeah, except now he wears graphics tees instead of a full kind of an outfit.
Instead of that dumb fuck open shirtless robe. Which although I do want to say to our audience, because I want this to become a meme within the podcast, is that Lawler did get an honorary "Shut Up, Lawler" for having the crown. He didn't say anything bad, but the fact that he had the crown got him an honorary "Shut Up, Lawler." So, bada bing, bada boom.
Now, again, Lawler at this point in time is not nearly as obnoxious and it's really because of the constraints of, at very least, the TV rating now. Like, he can't say things as gross and offensive as he used to, so he's kind of just resigned to dad jokes. And thankfully, honestly, it's a good thing that Vicky Guerrero was not allowed to be at ringside for her match, because if she was there, yikes, it would have been rough. As someone who's seen enough of matches where Lawler gets really gross when he talks about Vicky.
I will say it was kind of funny to have Cole, like the extent of Cole's heelness in this episode be calling Vicky a peach.
Like, yeah, like he
an angel. That's what he said.
Calls her an angel, even though of course no, she isn't. She keeps trying to cheat on behalf of Dolph. She is in fact not.
Like, I can at the very least, like, that's funny. Like you're doing the bit with like this comedy character, and like it's that's good joke. I'll give it to you. That's entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. That was a lot of fun. But again, thanks to Vicky just being a fun character mostly.
Yeah, Vicky Guerrero is really fun.
You know, speaking of characters who get the shaft, I've been learning recently that poor Kane just like can never catch a break either. And I do want to touch on the fact that he was like the first he was the first match of this episode against CM Punk actually. And then CM Punk just ended the episode by like bitching out and leaving.
He's like,
and so like Kane got a victory, sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I keep accidentally hitting on
and there was much rejoicing.
Yay! We keep accidentally hitting episodes where Kane just kind of gets the short end of the stick.
I mean, I don't think he wrestled in the 2013 episode. It was his lackeys. It was just like Kane for some reason. The weird episode was just like him coming across as like a beleaguered like reality TV character. Just like, God damn it with these idiots. Like, why can't my lackeys just do things? Like, he just kind of seemed like, this should have get. Yeah, like, he doesn't read as a devil. He's just kind of like
the devil's favorite demon, really David. The devil's favorite demon.
He doesn't read like that. The only thing about him that reads like that is he has that condition where his eyes are two different colors, and one of them's like this ghostly, like pale blue, which is cool. I like it, but he doesn't even have his goddamn mask, nor his hair, which I guess is a wig for some reason.
It is. It's always been a wig, but
why do they have Kane in a wig? I just don't.
You know, it's just not the same now that Kane doesn't set people on fire anymore. You know, he just doesn't seem as intimidating.
Yeah. It's just funny to me, like we have this character who's supposed to be like a scary demon man, and he just can't win, and when he does, it's just because CM Punk bitches out. Like, what is this? What is their writing for Kane?
He's just there at this point. He doesn't have a storyline going right now.
Yeah. It's so funny to me, like, how they can, like, pick people for episodes. Because, like, you just... It almost seems like a weird sort of random rotation of, like, okay, now we gotta do stuff with this guy. And it's just... I don't know. Just... What an interesting way to start the match is we start off with for some reason, Shawn Michaels hawking his TV show, and then we have CM Punk insulting him
his TV
for
show
some
on
reason.
the goddamn
and then we have
4 channel.
Yeah, and then we have the actually entertaining Booker T cutting in, or no, then we have the anonymous uh the anonymous commissioner being like, "Hey, CM Punk, I'm gonna
You
make
have a
you wrestle a
match.
match right now."
You know.
And Booker T being actually entertaining, and he spins the wheel, and boop, random opponent
Okay,
match.
okay.
Here fighting Kane.
I want to point out that is the like you want to like honestly the most accidentally funny thing on this episode is if you really try to think out the logic behind that whole segment. Okay, so they're like, you're gonna have a match right now. He spins the wheel, it lands on random, and immediately Booker T both has the name of who he's gonna fight, and the guy he's gonna fight is standing next to the wheel.
And on top of that, like, again, poke plot holes in WWE. But
How
like,
dare you?
wouldn't he already be fighting a random person? Like, why? Why is it a random match? He already
Like who is?
throw at him. Like,
Yeah, like okay,
it's
like
just
that's a
it's
good point. Is like,
repetitive.
if he doesn't land on random, if he lands on like anything else, who does he fight? Because he doesn't have a name of somebody. It's always
guess-
going to be random.
I guess Kane still. Yeah, it's just what that. Why was that the gimmick? Like, sure, I guess we got to start with an easier gimmick to like warm the audience up to the fact that we have a wheel of fate that are gonna decide the matches. But it's just like, if you think about it for more than 10 seconds, you're just like, don't quite.
I just kind of want to imagine that like Kane was pre-selected to be the random opponent. So like if he didn't get Punk the whole rest of the night, he just stands there by the wheel waiting for someone to land on random match.
Yeah,
He just spends the whole
and they like
night waiting.
and they can't like cut over to that side of the screen until like
Yeah,
just
I know.
to preserve the reveal.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man.
Thankfully they got him out
Yeah,
of the way
beautiful.
early, so they had more fun.
Oh yeah. Thank
Yeah.
God. I would have been worrying about that.
Like it
Yeah, no.
like it would
It's funny, like,
Mhm.
yeah. God.
Like it would have also been funny if like thank God they got a cage match because they brought that whole cage and they set it up. It'd be kind of unfortunate if a cage match didn't end up happening. Be like, well, that was a waste of time.
Yeah. It's just like, man, this episode is such a funny combo of really well utilized potential and just wasted potential.
Mm-hmm.
Which like, or not even that. It's just reminding us like, man, poor Kane just gets shafted a lot, or like, man, it sure is sure is like sure is cool that they make Sin Cara wrestle in those shitty conditions. Thank God he didn't botch anything in this match, despite that. But then tornado match, or for that matter, I do want to the Cena match first of all, because he and R-Truth are talented wrestlers, and the okay, I've been so good about names all episode. Who's Vicky's client?
Dolph Ziggler client.
No, not Dolph then.
Kofi.
Who's Dolph fighting?
Kofi Kingston.
Kofi, yeah. Kofi Kingston. Yeah.
Oh,
I've been so good about names all episode. Kofi.
Yeah. That's sick move where he like bounces off the ropes on his shoulders and then turns around.
Yeah, Kofi gave a phenomenal show. Dolph gave a pretty good show. For the most part, again, aside from poor Kane, everyone did, and I guess kind of Del Rio, because it just felt kind of like standard. Everyone put on a pretty good show for this. Like
that Del Rio Big Show was kind of like the most disappointing match because obviously they don't really have a lot of time, but like it felt like nothing was happening at all.
Yeah, that was just a it just felt by the
Yeah,
numbers.
it
But
felt like
again,
they were
we
treading
still got to
water
kind of make
until
up
Mark
for it.
Henry showed up.
Yeah. But for the most part, even with the kind of like disappointing things or the kind of like by the book, the display of athleticism from everybody. Again, Kofi was the one that I really really respected. Like he seemed like he has a lot of like that kind of is going underutilized with his lower kind of character position within the show. But at the very least, a fun uh a fun match like or a fun episode like uh uh ring work wise, and then the ending, of course, was a phenomenal way to cap it all off. Just like all of a sudden, an episode with not a whole lot of story, boom, story explosion in the form of this grand monologue.
Oh, you want story, huh? Ba-bam.
Yeah, I'll give you some fucking story. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I think this was a fun episode, a lot more fun than I was expecting it to be.
It kind of grew for me as it like it grew on me as it went on. To start, I was like, but then it kept going. I'm like, okay, yeah, I was able to get into it a decent amount. Again, it wasn't the most like the best thing we've watched, but it was a fun time pretty consistently, especially as it kind of like got going. Nothing to write home about, but a good diversion of an episode.
Yeah, and I think it's realistic to expect that sometimes it's going to be like that because it's hard writing for WWE. You know, you got to do like 4 to 5 hours of primetime TV every single week, no breaks. You know, it is a lot like a soap opera in that way, and that like not everything's going to be like super plot heavy and plot developing.
For as much as I'll give. Yeah, for as much as I'll give the writing crap for when it's not doing particularly well, like I'm trying to restrict my like actual ire for like only when the writing gets like actually problematic. Because when it's just kind of like bland or by the numbers, I can't dislike it too much because it just kind of comes with the territory. As long as I have like some fun during the episode, I'm not gonna like bash it as like this was awful to watch just because, you know, I get it. You can't. You just the sheer volume of content these people have to pump out on the regular is a lot. And the fact that we were treated to as much as we are, you know, that is a bit of a privilege as an audience member, and so we then kind of have the understanding on our own right of like, cool, if we want to have this much content to watch, we gotta take the rough with the smooth and it's not roll with it.
You can't. You can't be on fire for a whole year. You know, there's gonna be down periods, and you're really just kind of wanting those down periods to be fun in their own right, as opposed to like terrible.
Yeah, and this was fun enough. Pleasantly surprised at the good parts that were there. Really, again, CM Punk is the absolute star of this episode. This man, when he's given the right material, is able to chew the scenery and make for just such a delightful villain. I would like to play this character as like a stage role. Like he just gives this great kind of like reckless abandon to this villain. And it makes for a good show whenever he's on, and I can see why the Summer of Punk was the Summer of Punk, because this man knew how to do his stuff.
Absolutely. So I think that is a good wrap for this episode. What happens next week, David? Unfortunately, I guess I can't really promise you much in the way of strong plot development next week either. But oh man, are we going to have some fun? I guarantee it.
Next week is our special. Next week. Not to spoil things too much for the, but next week's our Christmas special, guys. Be ready.
We are going back. We are going back forward in time to the wonderful time of December 2012 for a WWE Christmas that is, if nothing else, very, very memorable. I'll tell you that.
And like any self-respecting, just as things to look forward to, like any self-respecting Christmas special in the modern era, we of course will drag in a special guest star. And I think the slight irony in the special guest star we're dragging in here is that we are bringing our Jewish friend into the Christonormativity, as it were.
Okay, I guess if you're gonna say it, then it's okay. I wasn't gonna say it, but I guess if you are.
I was thinking about that, and I was like, yeah, because next week's gonna be, I think, just a fun, silly time to be had by all.
Indeed. So, guess we're gonna plug our stuff on the way out, especially because David,
the poor Jews into celebrating Christmas for entertainment.
All right. Yeah, I think we got to start plugging our stuff on the way out.
Oh shoot, we forgot to do that, didn't we?
No, I planned it for the end. I'll have you know. All right. I have lost David, it seems. Fun times to be had here, folks. So I'll go ahead and plug our stuff. You can find us on the Noobs and Knockouts podcast. You can find us on YouTube. And this is very exciting. And I'm sad I have to lose David here for this one. You can find us on Spotify now. And you can find us on the iTunes store. Thank you. And have a wonderful evening, guys.
We just got approved by Apple. Yeah, take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.